Watching the American government move is not unlike watching molasses drip in wintertime. It's slow. It's painfully slow. It's boring. What we find is that the Founding Fathers designed a government purposefully to be extraordinarily inefficient.
It would perhaps be more elegant to say that the checks and balances institutionalized in our constitutional structure deliberately slow down the pace which we make laws, institutionalize deliberation, institutionalize consideration.
What's the most efficient form of government? Well, if you're looking for efficiency and effectiveness, there's only one answer, and it's dictatorship.
The framers were deeply concerned that members of Congress would act too precipitously, that they would act on whim, they would act in a way that advanced the narrow and immediate interests of the people rather than a way that advanced the long-term considered interests of the people.
When one man with a strong vision can run an entire nation the way he sees fit, trust me, that's most efficient.
Does this create friction?
Inefficient is much safer than efficient.
We have to understand the friction is intended. Think of it as an effort to institutionalize moderate outcomes.
It's also most dangerous, often, if not always, most horrible. The list of benign dictators is very, very small over the space of human history, and there's a reason for that.
This first executive order that we are signing by the authority vested in me as President by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, promptly to close the detention facility at Guantanamo consistent with the national security and foreign policy interests of the United States and the interests of justice, I hereby order.
I used to be the sort of senior civilian advisor to the Secretary of Defense on global detainee issues, so I've spent a lot of time at Guantanamo.
And we then provide the process whereby Guantanamo will be closed no later than 1 year from now.
Closing Guantanamo was one of the very first policies that President Obama announced after coming into office in January 2009.
In one of my first acts as president, I took action to begin closing it.
It was in his very first week in office that he signed an executive order pledging to close Guantanamo within a year.
I've been working for 7 years now to get this thing closed.
And pretty quickly, he ran into a lot of political and congressional opposition.
And since that time, Congress has repeatedly imposed restrictions aimed at preventing us from closing this facility.
Within a pretty short amount of time, Congress had begun to enact legislative obstacles.
Today's hearing's entitled Closing Guantanamo.
It's easy to say that Guantanamo should be closed. It's hard to come up with a viable, practical, politically sustainable solution to what to do with the Guantanamo detainees instead.
Congress has repeatedly, over and over again, voted to enact clear bipartisan prohibitions on the very thing the president is again calling for, and that is the transfer of Guantanamo Bay terrorists into our local communities.
In simple terms, checks and balances are the mechanisms by which each of the branches of government prevent the other branches of government from exceeding their proper domain.
He can't unilaterally do that.
And each of those branches is vested with some authority to monkey about with the authorities of the other two.
It's the domain of Congress to pass laws, but the president has to sign a bill from Congress in order for the law to go into effect.
So each branch can make the lives of the other two difficult in some meaningful way.
It's the job of the judiciary to pass judgments on laws, to adjudicate disputes that arise under the laws.
And they absolutely do this, and it absolutely makes American government inefficient.
But the president appoints judges. But the president doesn't appoint judges alone. The president is checked and balanced by the Senate, which, under the Constitution, advises and consents on the question of judicial appointments. And Congress has the power to impeach the president.
So no one branch of government can get all that much done without the assistance or at least the acquiescence of some of the others.
Are we going to let this linger on for another 15 years, another 20 years, another 30 years?
You should actually be glad that government can't do much, because that, the founders would have told you, is the thing that separates us from despotism.